My wife, with a smug expression, looked at me and said, "After 20 years with someone like you, I finally found a real man. He's a retired officer. So don't even think about stopping me. He'll destroy you." I remained silent, shutting her out of my life completely, and watched as karma served its own justice. Daniel sat frozen at the dining table, his fingers trembling as he stared at the smug figure in front of him. "After all these years with a failure like you," Sophia sneered, her tone thick with disdain. "I finally found a real man, someone who truly knows how to treat me. He's a retired officer, Daniel. Someone with power, someone who understands what a woman like me deserves." Her smirk grew wider, challenging him to react, while the weight of her words hit him with the force of a tidal wave. In that moment, Daniel knew that everything he had known was over. As the sun set, Daniel sat at the dining table, staring at the remnants of a life he'd spent the last 2 decades building. The faint sound of glass clinking from the kitchen broke the silence, and when he looked over, he saw Sophia standing there, her face holding a smile that didn't belong to the woman he once knew. She stood with her arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance, daring him to speak. The smirk on her lips was laced with a sense of victory and superiority. She leaned on one foot, radiating arrogance, as she dropped the bombshell. "After 20 years with a loser like you, I've found a real man. He's a retired officer, powerful, respected. Don't even think about trying to stop me. He'll crush you." Her words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Despite the blow, he kept his composure. He had always been the calm one, even in the toughest moments. His silence only seemed to fuel Sophia's growing arrogance. She stepped closer, the smirk on her face becoming even more pronounced. "You should be thanking me for sticking around this long. But don't worry, I'll make this easy for you." Daniel inhaled deeply and slowly stood up, memories of their early years flooding his mind. He remembered their late-night talks, the laughter shared over burnt dinners in their cramped first apartment, and the feeling that, together, they could take on the world. But those memories had long been replaced with a cold distance. The sharp sting of her words had shattered what remained of their bond. The sacrifices he had made for her, for them, flashed before him. The late nights at work, the vacations never taken, the dreams delayed. All of it, dismissed by her with a smug smile. Though it would have been easy to lash out, Daniel knew better. He understood that restraint was his strength now, and his dignity was his armor. His mind swirled with anger, disbelief, and a tinge of sadness, but amid the storm of emotions, one thought remained clear. He wouldn't let her see him break. As he stood there, the weight of their past felt suffocating. But despite the pain, Daniel remained unbroken. The days that followed were eerily quiet. The house felt empty, but the silence gave Daniel room to think. He wasn't the man Sophia had painted him to be. He wasn't a failure. For years, he'd worked tirelessly to provide for their life, their future. But that was now a past that Sophia had so easily discarded. Daniel had always worked hard to create a stable life for his family, sacrificing his own dreams to make sure Sophia had everything she desired. Now, with her absence, he came to understand just how much of himself he'd lost along the way. Determined to rebuild, one morning he laced up a pair of old running shoes, the ones he'd abandoned years ago, and set out on a nearby trail. The crisp morning air filled his lungs, and though his first few steps felt heavy, a spark of resolve urged him to keep going. By the end of the week, he found himself running further, feeling more invigorated with every stride. At work, he immersed himself in a project he'd neglected for far too long. One night, while presenting a solution to a skeptical team, the room erupted in applause. His boss took him aside afterward, praising him. "Daniel, this is the kind of leadership we need." These moments weren't just small victories. They were affirmations of the person Daniel had always been capable of becoming. Each day, his strength grew. What had initially felt like a struggle soon became a steady march forward. At work, He tackled a challenging project that had been lingering for months. Long nights spent at his desk brought moments of triumph as he solved problems others thought impossible. Slowly but surely, Daniel was rediscovering his own value, one small victory at a time. His expertise as a software engineer had always been in demand, and he threw himself into a major project, one that would earn him both respect and a generous bonus. It wasn't just about the reward. It was about reclaiming his sense of worth. However, Sophia's words still echoed in his mind. Her real man, the retired officer, was nothing more than a distant figure in her fantasy life. Someone she believed would elevate her in ways Daniel never could, but Daniel wasn't interested in revenge. He didn't need to seek it. Life had a way of balancing things. Months passed, and Daniel flourished. Though he kept an eye on Sophia through mutual friends and social media, it wasn't out of spite. It was more out of curiosity. It didn't take long for the cracks in her new life to appear. Michael, the real man Sophia had found, wasn't the hero she had imagined. At first, she enjoyed the attention he lavished on her, but soon the cracks in his persona began to show. His temper was volatile, and his gambling problem drained their finances faster than she could comprehend. One evening at a gala, she attended alone, overhearing whispers about Michael's public outburst at a bar. "He's a mess," one person said. Poor Sophia thought she upgraded, but she just walked into a nightmare. As rumors about Michael's behavior grew, Sophia started to realize that the life she had left behind wasn't as worthless as she had once believed. His past as a retired officer gave him an air of authority, but his retirement wasn't the glamorous life she had imagined. The whisper started at a networking event Daniel attended. He overheard two colleagues near the buffet. "Did you hear about Michael? He's been banned from the casino downtown," one said. "I heard he had a blow-up at a bar last week," the other added. That evening, Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. Sophia's new life isn't as perfect as she thought. Turns out Michael's temper and gambling problems are making everything fall apart. Pieces began to fall into place, and Daniel couldn't help but marvel at how life was unfolding. Sophia's so-called perfect life was quickly spiraling into chaos. One evening, he received an unexpected call from another mutual acquaintance. "You'll never guess what's going on with Sophia," the friend began. "She's been showing up at events alone. Michael's apparently drowning in debt. Word is, she's regretting leaving you." Daniel couldn't suppress a small chuckle. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, at least not exactly. But there was something strangely validating in seeing the path she'd chosen unravel before her. There was a quiet sense of vindication in knowing that Sophia's arrogance had ultimately led her to the life she had earned. A year after she left, Daniel received an invitation to a gala hosted by a tech company he had recently partnered with. The event was formal, a black-tie affair filled with influential individuals. Daniel arrived confident and poised, a stark contrast to the man Sophia had once dismissed as a failure. As fate would have it, Sophia was there too. The moment she spotted him across the room, her eyes widened as she took in his tailored suit and noticed how effortlessly he conversed with the company's CEO. Hesitant, she approached him. The confidence she once carried was now replaced with uncertainty. Her steps faltered, a wave of regret churning in her stomach as she remembered the life she had walked away from, the stability, the quiet strength Daniel had always offered, and how he had never let her down. Now, as she looked at him, composed and thriving, she felt the weight of her decisions crash down on her. Her fingers nervously twitched at the strap of her clutch as she managed to say, "Daniel, you look great." Her shoulders were slumped, and with each step closer to him, the regret wrapped around her tighter. She replayed her choices in her mind, and for the first time in years, she felt small and unsure. When their eyes met, she no longer saw the man she had dismissed. She saw someone who had flourished in her absence, someone she had severely underestimated. The realization of her mistakes was overwhelming. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you look good." Daniel met her gaze and remained silent for a moment, letting the quiet speak for itself. Then he smiled politely. "Thank you, Sophia. I've been doing well." Her eyes flickered, and perhaps there was a hint of regret. "I heard about your project. Congratulations. You've really made something of yourself." Daniel nodded, acknowledging her words, then asked, "And you? How are things with Michael?" Sophia's face fell. "It's complicated. He's been going through a lot." Daniel's smile remained unchanged. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope things work out for you." Sophia opened her mouth to say more, but Daniel politely excused himself, leaving her standing there. As he walked away, he didn't feel anger or sadness, only a sense of closure. Sophia had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. That night, Daniel reflected on everything he had endured. Sophia's betrayal had wounded him deeply at first, but it had also been the catalyst for his transformation. He thought about how he'd rebuilt himself, step by step, proving his own strength and capabilities. Strength he didn't even know he had. As he gazed at the city lights, a gentle breeze caressed his face and it hit him. His success wasn't about seeking revenge. It was about rediscovering who he was. As for Sophia, her downfall was a testament to how karma worked when left to its own devices. Daniel realized that true strength wasn't about winning someone back. It was about letting them go and moving forward. He had rebuilt his life, found strength in his independence, and rediscovered his worth. Standing on his balcony, gazing at the city below, Daniel had a realization. Karma didn't need any help. It had its own timeline and delivered justice in its own way. The best form of revenge wasn't retaliation or anger. It was moving on and thriving. Sometimes, the greatest way to win is to let life deliver the lessons they refuse to learn.